Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. I'm John, Father John Deere, and today I'm speaking with my friend Rivera Sun. This is a project of www.beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and practicing nonviolence and working for a more just, more nonviolent world. So let's begin with a little prayer, as I usually like to do. So I just invite you, wherever you are, just to take a deep breath and to relax, and let's all recenter ourselves into the spirit of peace, the presence of the God of peace, of universal love, and welcome the nonviolent Jesus, and just take a moment to ask for whatever graces we need to fulfill our vocations as peacemakers. God of peace, Spirit of peace, thank you for the blessings of life, love, and peace. Be with us as we reflect on your call to practice nonviolence, to be peacemakers, and to work for a more nonviolent, more just world. Bless us, inspire us, disarm us, strengthen us, and send us out to do our part to help end poverty, racism, greed, injustice, war and nuclear weapons, and environmental destruction, that we might be your holy peacemakers and welcome your reign of universal love, nonviolence, and peace on earth. Amen. So it's a great pleasure to welcome today my friend Rivera Sun, who's an author and activist, and written many books and novels, including the Dandelion Insurrection and the award-winning Ari Ara Series. She's the editor of Nonviolence News, and the program coordinator for Campaign Nonviolence, which is a project of paceandbene.org, which Rivera and I used to work together on the staff years ago. Her articles are published through Peace Voice and in hundreds of journals nationwide. And she's on the board of Backbone Campaign and the advisory board of World Beyond War. And I invite everyone to read about her and get her books. You can check out her website, riverasun.com. So welcome, Rivera, to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks for the great work that you're doing with this podcast.
Great, and thank you for all your good work. Well, I think of you as one of our great teachers and researchers about grassroots movements of nonviolent resistance. So I thought we could start there, and you could just reflect as you'd wish to tell all the thousands of people listening about what's going on in the U.S. And from your perspective there at your home in Maine, what signs of resistance are you seeing as you look out in the country in this new time under the Trump administration that we're all enduring?
Yeah, thank you. We are seeing an unprecedented wave of organizing, of activism, of protests. We had the No Kings protest last month, or a little while ago, that brought out somewhere between 4 and 11 million people, if depending on which estimate you're going by, which is one of the largest single days of protests ever in U.S. history. And what we're really seeing is that the erosion of civil liberties, the undermining of constitutional law, the attacks on, health care, on social services, public services, is galvanizing a lot of people to express how upset they are with what's going on in this country. Things like the immigration crackdown and the ICE raids, or the sending of National Guard and Marines to occupy Los Angeles, have really got people very concerned about the rising authoritarianism. And we're seeing a kind of corresponding rise of people not just protesting, but engaging in all forms of non-cooperation, intervention, all these nonviolent tactics.
Well, that's encouraging. One of the things that's happening this week as you and I are recording is the launch of something called 1 Million Rising, which I just heard about from you through campaignonviolence.org. Tell us about that, because it may be over with by the time people listen to this, but it's another great sign.
1 Million Rising was an effort to train, mobilize, and gather together 1 million people to learn specifically about the part of the nonviolent action toolbox that we call non-cooperation. And it's distinct from things like protest and persuasion, where we lift our voices, we say what's wrong. And it's not necessarily the same as acts of intervention, where you literally put your body in front of tanks or, shut down a road. Acts of non-cooperation are where we withdraw our support and our cooperation and our participation, or our expected obedience in systems. So some of the large organizations that have been mobilizing for these rallies, namely Indivisible and No Kings, collaborated on bringing people together to be trained by a group called Freedom Trainers, by folks like Daniel Hunter and Maria Stephan. Maria Stephan being one of our two foremost authorities in civil resistance, particularly against the kind of authoritarianism that we're looking at right now. So on the first day of training, they had over 100,000 people registered, all told, between the people who watched live, who watched the live streams, who followed up with the recording. Over 130,000 people engaged with this information and this knowledge about how we resist authoritarians, how we use acts of non-cooperation, what that means. And then thousands of them followed up by organizing local resistance gatherings where they passed on this information to their local community. And this is part of an effort to say, we need street protests, we need street demonstrations, but we also need to go further if we want to stop the abuses that we're seeing. And that's going to look like many of the things that we have been seeing, but on a much larger scale. So, we know that the Tesla takedown campaign was a very successful boycott that just plummeted Tesla's stocks over the behaviors of what Elon Musk was doing, undermining public services. This is an act of non-cooperation. All boycotts are. We also, are seeing people standing up to ICE. Particularly teachers have been taking very bold stands to say, it's just not acceptable to arrest children's parents and leave them stranded at school, or to come into school grounds and terrorize the children looking for undocumented immigrants. We're also seeing thousands of people be trained in Know Your Rights training so that they can really use the strength of the law to say to ICE, no, you can't raid this workplace without an actual judicial warrant. So these are acts of non-cooperation where people say, no, I will not do this, I will not let you do this, I will not go along with what is happening. And, one of the goals of the 1 Million Rising is to say these are the kinds of actions that we need if we're going to meet the times that we're in and meet the challenges that we face. So it's a very encouraging thing to see this develop. It takes the energy of the mass demonstrations that we've been seeing on April 5th, on May Day, on No King's Day, and helps people do what they're hungry for, which is go to the next level and find out how they can really start to cooperate and organize and plan and strategize for this next level of action.
Thank you, Rivera. You've been giving workshops and weekends across the country over the years, talking about movement building, how movements work, and how we go to those next levels of non-cooperation and all the different aspects of grassroots nonviolent resistance. And one of the key teachings you have is about knocking down the pillars, the structures that uphold these systems of injustice and oppression and the tyranny we're seeing. Tell us about that. Any of the way you present the theories or how movements work, and in particular this idea of the pillars that are upholding the injustice.
Yeah, movements succeed because of two main dynamics. One is our participation in them. And participation is the single most biggest determinant of success for a movement. So it's really important that we join in. Whether that's a street protest or a boycott, our participation and outreach to others is vitally important. But the second part of that is this analysis tool that we call the pillars of support. And it's the idea that power holders alone, let's say a president or a dictator, they don't have power on their own. If they give an order to go dig a ditch, unless we cooperate and we obey and we pick up the shovels and go dig the ditch, the power holder doesn't have that power magically, right? So the pillars of support are these different sectors of society, things like the military and the police, civil society groups, education like universities and students, the media, the courts, the businesses, the unions and the workers. These different categories are each different pillars that either prop up the regime or the dictator, or they say, no, we will not prop you up. We will not give the weight of our time, our money, our skills, our capacity, and our support to what you're doing. So in nonviolent struggle, what we try to do is to engage with those pillars to get them to withdraw their support. And then that the dictator, which you can imagine sitting on top of those pillars, if he doesn't have support from them, his regime will collapse. And that's what we mean by the pillars of support model. And in nonviolent struggle, what we try to do is use things like demonstrations or boycotts or shutdowns or walkouts or blockades to get those pillars to either directly engage in the movement and join the boycott, or step aside and simply don't participate in supporting the dictator or the power holder. And this has been really instrumental. We definitely know that this is a critical thing that has made movements either succeed or fail, whether or not they can get these pillars to withdraw their support.
Well, here we are, it's hard to believe, like 8 months into the Trump administration with theoretically years to go, unless we all do what you're suggesting. And we're witnessing the dismantling of democracy and so many forms of injustice and so much suffering. I know this is almost silly to ask, but what do you think needs to happen in light of all your understanding of movements in the next months and years, movement-wise? In general, if you could say something like that?
I think, first of all, each of us needs to sit down and do a little soul searching and decide whether this is a normal presidency that we disagree with the policies of, or this is a presidency that has stepped outside the rule of law, outside the confines of what the job is all about. Because that's going to change how we approach resistance. We're always going to oppose unjust policies. We're always going to rally to stop the damages from hurting ourselves and our communities. We're going to do our best to respond to the barrage of terrible ideas that seems to be coming out of the White House these days. But if this administration decides that it doesn't want to be constrained by the rule of law, it doesn't want to obey the courts, it doesn't want to give up power when it comes time to elect a new president, let's say, it doesn't want to follow the laws that govern the land, it wants to do things like send troops all over the country without invoking the Posse Comitatus Act or the Insurrection Act, both of which are illegal and unconstitutional to do. He can't send troops to U.S. soil without one of those two things, and he doesn't have it. So if this is not a normal presidency, then we need to think about, is it time to respond in a way that isn't normal? The normal way would be to wait another 3.5 years and then elect somebody new, right? That would be our normal process. The not so normal way would be to say that we need to invoke the articles of impeachment. Trump has already committed something like 19 impeachable offenses. The list is long and it's growing every single day. There's plenty of material by which to impeach, convict, and remove him from office. But what we lack is the political will of our legislators who need to stand up for the Constitution and get it done. So I would say that, if we think that this is an authoritarian regime that no longer is being constrained by the laws that govern this land, we have to get ready for a struggle like that. And that's where we have to look to historic examples all over the world, things like Serbia ousting Milosevic, or the Philippines rising up against Ferdinand Marcos. We are lucky we have an impeachment process that we can push our legislators to do. We just saw South Korea in 2024 go through that exact process after their president falsely invoked the martial law. And so they impeached their president and got him out of office. So this is just one thing that I think we need to do, is do some soul searching. What kind of a situation, what kind of a mess, how deep it is, and how do we need to respond because of that? That said, we do need to stop the damages, as many as we can, wherever we can. We need to push for accountability wherever we can and try to uphold the systems and the institutions that have kept democracy in place. And speaking of democracy, we can't take our eye off that. If we want to live in a democratic society, we have to insist on it and demand it. And this isn't just with the administration. This is also with things like masked ICE agents roaming about our communities and snatching people off the street. That is terrifying. That is not the kind of country that I was raised to believe in or to expect that we would ever witness at this level. And we need to maintain our sense of perspective on this, that this is not acceptable. It's not okay. We need to make sure that all of our institutions are standing up for their independence. Things like universities. We're seeing Harvard and all these other universities push back against the administration's attempt to control them and to cut off their funding and to censor them. We need media institutions to not bow down to the censorship or the control of one administration, but stand up for the free press. So there's lots and lots of work to do. But I would say one of the big things that got us into this mess that we can work on as a society is non-cooperating with corporations and billionaires. They already have too much money and power. And so every day that we participate in their systems as buyers, as sellers, as consumers, is yet another day that we're giving them more power. We're giving away our power to them. For example, there's 140 million people in this country who have an Amazon Prime account. And every month they give $15 to Jeff Bezos and Amazon Prime. I think that we should all stop that. We should stop giving our $15 a month to Amazon Prime and take it back and give it to our local community. Give it to your local farmers, give it to a mutual aid network, or just stash it away for a rainy day, because the way that our economy is going, we're going to need that. So this list goes on. There's a lot of things we can do. Staying connected to the many types of campaigns that are out there on the many issues is a great idea. And, try to stay grounded. Try to find your place and plug in and not run around like a chicken with your head cut off and trying to do everything. So, find what you want to work on and do that, because we need you in the movement.
Thank you, Rivera. I wonder if you could be specific in a few campaigns that people might want to consider taking part in this fall and next year. So, for example, Campaign Nonviolence, which you're working hard on, but there are others. Maybe just list a few that make sure people know about them. What are ones that are growing and need people from all walks of life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this 1 Million Rising campaign I just mentioned, there will be new rounds of that and new ways to plug in. So please do go check it out and connect to those who are working on non-cooperation. The Target Fast has also expanded its approach to pressuring Target to uphold DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're now also working on Amazon. So supporting those boycott campaigns. We saw how effective Tesla takedown was, so keeping your eye out for that. The big rallies like No Kings and 5051 and Indivisible and Women's March, keep showing up for those, because we need to show our strength. Wherever you can find a local group working on resisting ICE, I think it's great to connect with them and at least support mutual aid for them. If you're not in a position to be someone who directly confronts ICE agents, then support them in other ways. And mutual aid. Mutual aid is how we show solidarity, not charity. How we recognize that the economic policies of this administration are causing economic hardship for millions of Americans right now. And the social safety net is eroding and crumbling. So making sure that we stock our food pantries, making sure that we help at the food bank, making sure that we check in with new mothers and fathers and making sure that they have that little extra support that they need as they're trying to raise their kids. Making sure that someone can meet rent so that they're not thrown out in the cold. This is what mutual aid is about. It helps us maintain our strength as a populace while we push to resist the big problems.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Well, you've also done a lot of work studying nonviolent movements around the world, and you've mentioned some of them. I wondered if you could want to say anything else about what you see happening elsewhere in the world. Erica Chenoweth and Maria was on the podcast, have been saying that more has been happening in the last 50 years in terms of global participation in grassroots new movements than ever before in history. What are you seeing?
That's absolutely true. Just a few weeks ago, we saw India hold a one-day strike that mobilized 250 to 350 million people.
Wow.
Imagine that.
No,
the entire size of the U.S. population went on strike for a day.
Why?
Why? They did it because the Modi government is rolling out a series of labor reforms, or trying to do so. And they were upset because it's going to, lower wages, it's going to lower workplace safety, it's going to impact many of the things that workers rely on in India. So 10 big unions went on strike. They represented 150 million people. And if you can imagine, every person who's part of that union who's going to go on strike because the union striking said to their partner or their sibling or their friend, go on strike with me. That quickly you get to 300 million people. So that was an extraordinary action that happened in mid-July. And, but it is indicative of this kind of rising swell of activity that we're seeing. We're seeing mass protests against corruption in Serbia and against authoritarianism in Hungary. Ukraine had huge protests against Zelensky's attempt to kind of roll back some of their anti-corruption agencies' independence. This is very unusual in the war context that they're in. But we are seeing people, recognize that if our democratic institutions falter and if they backslide and if they can't do the job of protecting the people or ensuring a livable planet or opposing a war, then we, the people, need to. We need to reach for the tools of nonviolent action, which I consider, in this country, we talk about the three systems of checks and balances. So we have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the judicial branch. But I maintain that there's a fourth system of checks and balance, and that is people using nonviolent action. Over and over again, when those three institutions fail to stand up for justice, it is the people using nonviolent action who say a change must occur. We saw this with the suffragettes. We saw this with the civil rights movement, with the labor movement, with the environmental movement, and we're going to see it again in support of democracy. Americans have lots of challenges, but our love for democracy is not one of them. That has been an unshakable value in this country for a very long time. And I think we're going to see that this country will rise up for it again. And that's a vision and a goal that I know that I'm working for as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. This is very powerful, the way you put it, and gives me hope. And yet, we're so many struggles at home for democracy and around the world, and human rights and social justice in all new ways. But hovering over the whole planet are these two catastrophic forces, nuclear weapons and climate change. Although a lot of people now say there's a third that's leading us to the brink, which is another pandemic. So, and in the past, a lot of us, I myself, spent a lot of my life organizing and resisting nuclear weapons. But now we're just so spread thin. I guess I want to ask you any thoughts about especially nuclear weapons and climate change. How can we keep those movements, the environmental movement and the anti-nuclear movement, moving when we're all struggling just with basic rights? And maybe that's why in the end it's a soul-searching question. We each do what we feel we can or what we're called to do.
I think one of the things that gives me a lot of faith in nonviolent action is that a lot of these struggles that I study around the world happen in places where people don't enjoy very many democratic rights and freedoms. Their right to speak out is severely restricted. Their right to assemble, like so for a march or a rally, is very restricted. But they still have this toolbox of over 300 different methods of nonviolent struggle. And even when it's outlawed, they will reach for things like strikes and boycotts. They'll disguise them cleverly as a call-in sick day or a work slow strike like they used in Chile when they wanted to resist the dictator Pinochet, but they couldn't go on strike. Everybody slowed down. Like they literally walked slowly through the streets. They literally shopped slowly. And suddenly everybody knew that everybody opposed the dictator. So, nonviolent action is incredibly creative and versatile. And that's what gives me a little bit of hope, even though things are pretty bleak right now. That we have more power than we think. We have way more tools than most of us know. And I think about things like in Pakistan in 2009, their president went toe-to-toe with their Supreme Court justice and kicked the Supreme Court justice off the bench. And the lawyers immediately started picketing outside the courts. It was kind of interesting because they didn't file a lawsuit. They decided to use nonviolent action. And so then, this went on for a while, and the president started getting his hackles up, and he ended up closing the courts and disbanding the Congress. So things got even worse, right? And so the lawyers and the judges decided they would not obey the closing of the courts. They went and they opened 75% of the courts in the country and just held normal court proceedings saying, we're not going to obey you. Then the president had to back down a little bit, and he had to reinstate some of the judges and repeal martial law and reinstate Congress. But he didn't do the full measure of what they needed, so they organized thousands of lawyers to march on this long march, and then it became a motorcade through Pakistan to the capital. And as the motorcade got closer and closer and closer, it became this thing of like, is the president going to back down? What's going to happen when we reach the city? And sure enough, as they reached the city, the president actually backtracked and was forced to step down out of power. This story goes on. There's many chapters, but it's a great illustrative example of, these tools are here for us when the going gets tough. They're here for us when all of our rights and freedoms seem to go away. And when we reach for them, we find that power that we really need. So if we're looking at climate justice, and we see the doors closing on the federal level, a lot of climate organizers are saying, okay, we're going to the cities. The cities are going to be the agency of change. It's where we're going to get in solar panels. It's where we're going to get public transportation. It's where we're going to change the zoning laws so we stop doing a lot of carbon emission through heating and housing. So, where there's a will, there's a way, and we just got to keep going.
Wow, that's great. Maybe because we're running out of time, I could just ask you one last question. In your workshops and your teaching as you work with people around the country, what basic points would you have about, I'm calling it holistic nonviolence, maintaining your personal nonviolence and practicing peace as we go forward and creative ways in nonviolent action and doing what we can to resist. You spoke earlier about making sure we're all grounded, staying grounded. That's really nice. But can you be more specific? Suggestions do you have for folks to sustain themselves for the long haul in this work of grassroots nonviolence movements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's many things I am thinking about every single day. One is don't go alone. Find friends and do it together. Two is take breaks. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint, and it's got to be like a relay race. That's why you need friends. You've got to pass that torch to them and then pick it up when your turn comes again. I've been trying to do a practice where I take a breath and then act. Because when I get hot and bothered, it's very easy for me to react without thinking, and I might not act in the way that I want to. So I've been trying to train myself, particularly in my crazy inbox, before I hit send on an email, to take a breath, so that this becomes a habit for myself, no matter where I am, whether I'm at a protest or whether I'm at a meeting or whether I'm, just really upset about the next bit of news and about to snap at my partner, to take a breath, then act. And there are things that I am really challenged to do in these times, but are very deep principles of nonviolence, like be against the injustice, not people. Don't go after the humans involved. Go after the behavior. Go after the policy. Go after the injustice. Because people can and will change, and we want to make the space for them to do that. And then the one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is to try not to become what you oppose. I think nothing would satisfy the forces of hate and destruction more than to turn all of us into forces of hate and destruction as well, against them or for them, one way or the other. So reclaiming your humanity, reclaiming your sense of love, reclaiming your sense of integrity and purpose, I think are great acts of resistance in this time, and very deep, very profound ones. So these are some of the practices that I'm doing in terms of like how I'm trying to really embody the deepest principles of nonviolence that I can, and it's not easy.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's really encouraging, and it's great wisdom, and I hope we can all join you in staying grounded like that and going forward for the long haul. So thank you so much, Rivera Sun, for speaking with me today, and thank you, friends, for listening to this episode of the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. You can hear more podcasts and find other upcoming Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. Please consider offering a donation to support this free work, and if you can, to leave some positive feedback or a review at NCR or Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you use. And please help spread the word by telling your friends and colleagues about this podcast. So may the God of peace bless you all, and keep on following the nonviolent Jesus, and see you all next time.